H block. Okay. All right. So now we are looking at 1.2. So we're still in the same section, still linear functions, but instead of supply and demand, we're looking at cost, and then we're going to look at revenue and profit. Okay. So you really do have to pay attention to the actual vocab words as to what type of problem you're looking at. Like the word problems last night were all about supply and demand. These are going to be about cost. Actually, 19 through 25, odd is going to be about cost, and then 31 through 37, a little bit of cost, a little bit of revenue and profit. So you really just have to pay attention to the words. You can't just like find an equation and solve for X kind of thing, okay? All right, so when we're talking about cost, we're talking about cost is what it says, the cost of manufacturing an item. In other words, so the manufacturer is bearing this cost, okay? It's not the cost of what you're paying for the item, like how much it's more of the cost of making the item. Does that make sense? Okay. So, and those types of equations consist of two parts. First is the fixed cost. So that's the cost of designing the product, setting up the factory, training the workers, etc. So this is the cost. The fixed cost is what money you have to put out to just get ready to produce the item. You haven't even made any items yet, but you're getting ready to make them. So that's all the backup, all the preliminary cost. So that is, fixed cost is usually seen as the y-intercept, or b. In a y equals an x plus b equation. Okay, and then the marginal cost, okay, is the other piece of it, and it is the cost for each additional item. So this includes how much materials go into every item, the labor, the shipping, etc. So the marginal cost depends on the quantity. So that depends. So if you're going to make, let's say you're a bakery, right? So the fixed cost would be buying the ovens, getting the space, buying the materials, buying your rent, that kind of thing. Your marginal cost is buying the ingredients, okay? Because you're buying the ingredients based on how many cupcakes you're going to provide, right? How many cookies, etc. So if we're looking at an mx plus b equation, if the b is the fixed cost, what do you think would represent the marginal cost? The what? The m, right? Because it's the m that is being multiplied by how many you're making, right? So the b is what happens when you just begin manufacturing. The m is what you're having to pay for every item you make. So when we're talking about a cost equation, the book's pretty consistent with naming it C. Okay, that just means cost equation using X. You could also get C of Q's if they use Q as the variable. And again, the M represents the marginal, or the slope represents marginal, but you can think about M, and then the B represents fixed. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so now there's a couple different, just like there's a couple different types of supply and demand equations. Okay. All right, so there's a couple different types of cost equations, right? Just like supply and demand can look differently, and even revenue and profit can look differently. So this is one example. So a company has an initial setup cost of $500. Each item produced costs an additional $15 per item. What is the total cost function? Okay, so this is about the most basic type of problem. So again, we are looking to build an mx plus b equation, right, calling it cost. A company has initial setup cost of $500. So initial setup is what type of cost? Fixed or marginal? Fixed, right? And it belongs where in the equation? Here, right? So we've got C of x equals at least plus 500. Each item produced costs an additional $15 per item. So what kind of a cost is that? Marginal cost, right? So in this instance, it costs them $500 to get all set up, but then every item they make is costing them $15. So marginal cost relates to slope, right? So the total cost equation is 15x plus 500. Okay? So this is comparable to like in linear equations where they say write an equation given that the y-intercept is 500 and the slope is 15, right? So it's just like the most basic type of equation. So that's our cost equation. So how much will it cost for the company to produce 15 items? So how would we solve that? Right, so substitute x equals 15, right? So the cost of 15 items is going to be 15 times 15 plus 500. So 15 times 15 plus 500. So 720. Okay. How much will it cost the company to produce 130 items? We're going to what? Substitute 130 in for x, right? So then we want C of 130. So again, the 500 doesn't change because that was our startup cost. The marginal cost is what really changes with every x. Questions about that? Okay. Okay, now, so that's one type of problem. That's like the most basic, where you're actually told straight up what marginal cost is and what fixed cost is. The next type, so let's try this one. So the marginal cost to make X batches of prescription medication is $10 per batch. The cost to produce, that should be, the cost to produce 100 batches is $1,500. Let's change that. The cost to produce 100 batches is $1,500. So this kind of gave us a mix of information. First statement, the marginal cost to make X batches of medicine is $10 per batch. So what's that statement telling us? Phoebe? That the what? Not the fixed. This is saying the marginal cost to make X batches is 10. So it's right. So marginal is M, right? So in our equation, we know slope, right, or the M is going to be 10. But then it says the cost to produce 100 batches is $1,500. So is our fixed cost $1,500? Now, what can we do with that? What's that? 1,500 is C. For what value of X? 100. This is actually gives us a data point, right? So just like our homework, this is actually saying when X is 100, Y is 1,500. So now we have the type of problem where we're given slope and a data point, right? So how do we solve for B? Plug everything in and solve. Does that make sense? So see how this really relates right back to the first day when we didn't have any words to it, but we were told to write an equation given 2 points, right? Write an equation given slope and y-intercept. This is write an equation given slope and a point. Okay? So, do that. Again, we know our 10 is M, so we can plug in y equals m x plus b. So we get 1,500 equals 1,000 plus b. Subtract 1,000, and we get b equals 500. So our cost equation, C of x equals 10x plus 500. Okay, make sense? Okay, so then it says, how much will it cost the company to produce 23 items? again, our quantity is our X value, right? So to produce 23 items, that is giving us an X, right? So we plug it in. So we want to find C of 23. So C of 23 is 10 times 23 plus 500. Again, we're plugging it into the cost equation we just came up with. And that becomes 230 plus 500. So it costs $730 to produce 23 items. Now go ahead and compute how much it will cost to produce 530 items. Okay, so again, to find the cost to produce 530 items, you plug in 530 for X, simplify it, and you get $5,800. Okay, so again, so that's cost. So we've done supply and demand. Now this is cost. This on your homework relates to 19 to 25I, and what those problems will tell you is it will give it various combinations of giving you either the marginal cost or the fixed cost or a point to find out what's missing. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so that's cost. Now we're going to kind of switch gears a little bit and go into the last type of business application, and that is revenue and profits. Okay, so revenue is defined as the amount of money brought in by selling the product. So when you're talking about revenue, it's just how much you're selling and how much money they're paying for that item. So we're not thinking about how much it costs you to make the item. We're not talking about manufacturing costs. We're talking about purely how much money you're getting by selling these items. So when we think about that, it's actually just the quantity you've sold times the price you're charging. That's QTY for quantity. Sorry. Quantity times price. Okay. Now, just like we all, does that make sense? Times. Sorry. Yeah. Fine. So, like, if you've sold 10 cupcakes and they're $3 a piece, your revenue is $30. You brought in $30. Now, just like cost always uses a capital C for its equation, revenue, we're always going to use an R of X or R of Q. And the equation for revenue, actually, let's change this to R of Q. And the equation for revenue is always really simple. It's always going to be Q times P. So again, just quantity times price, because you're not bringing into account any other factors, okay? But how many you sold, how much people paid for each one you sold, okay? Now, when a company wants to break even, get this turned off. Was it you guys who were trying to help me get those turned off? It didn't work. Yeah. Yeah. And I've asked around, and the teachers are all like, I just exited out of my email. But anyway, so we'll do that another day. Okay, so we're talking about break even. So when a company breaks even, they want their revenue to equal their cost, right? They want the money they had to spend to make those products, they want that to equal how much money they're bringing in from those products, okay? So when we think about the cost equation we just looked at, break even is when the revenue equals the cost. As revenue continues to increase above the cost, the company will make a profit. Does that make sense? When revenue is below the cost, you're losing money, right? Profit is the amount of money actually made by selling the product. Yeah. What was I going to write there? So profit is actually taking the money brought in minus minus the money it costs to make. So if you need it in words, there you go. In equations, it looks like this. Again, we talk about profit equations as capital P of X, and we've got revenue minus cost. So these are the relationships we're going to work through right now. We've got revenue is always quantity times price. Break even is cost equals revenue, and profit is subtracting cost from revenue. So does that make sense to you guys? Like just concept-wise, how that all fits together? Okay. All right, so let's try it. So a firm selling poultry feed finds that the total cost in dollars is given by C of X equals 20X plus 100. Management plans to charge $24 per unit for food. Okay, so just to relate this back to our previous slide, what type of cost does 100 represent? Goods, right? What type of cost does 20 represent? Money. Okay. Management plans to charge $24 per unit for food. So that means when they're selling it, they're charging $24. So what is the revenue function? So what is R of X? What pieces do we need for a revenue function? Revenue is what? Quantity times price. And I do apologize, now I'm using Q's and X's, kind of mixing them together. But so in this case, our quantity is going to be an X. So what is our price? How much are they charging someone to buy food? $24. So the revenue function is 24 times X. In other words, if they sell 10 units of food, they're going to bring in 24 times 10. They're going to bring in $24. Okay? How many units must be sold to break even? So break even happens when your revenue equals your cost, right? So we set those equal to each other. So we're looking at revenue equals cost. So we're going to take our revenue function and set it equal to our cost function. Okay, and solve. So subtract 2x from both sides. I was going to say that 20x. Okay. One second. Should be a better number there.
Do you not plug the 24 into the X to the cost?
No, right now, break even is just where R of X equals C of X. Just like equilibrium point, this is the equivalent of equilibrium point in supply and demand, right? We set supply equal to demand.
And then
you find where they're going to meet. Here, revenue equals cost, where they're going to make as much money as it's costing them to produce, is setting revenue function equal to cost function. Okay. So we set revenue equal to cost. We solve for X. We get X equals 25. So when they sell 25 units, they will have brought in revenue as much money as it costs them to make those 25 units. Does that make sense? So as they sell more than 25 units, they're going to realize a profit. If they sell less than 25 units, they've lost money because they have put out more money than they brought in. Okay? So find the profit function. So what was our equation for profit function? Profit was what? If you look back at our notes, RX minus CX, right? So revenue minus cost. Now, be careful about this. Use parentheses, because this is the biggest mistake people probably make on this test, is giving me a profit function, because it's not super complicated, but you have to be careful. So our revenue function is 24x minus our cost function, which was, what, 20x plus 100. So again, I don't want you to leave it like this. I will take off if you don't simplify it and leave combine like terms. So you have to distribute that negative, right? And we get 24 minus 20, 24x minus 20x is 4x minus 100. Okay? So that's our profit function. Now, what is the profit if 100 units are sold? What do we do? What do we do at 100? Right, plug in 100 for x. Okay. So we plug in 100 for x, so we get 400 minus 100 equals $300. Does that make sense? So let's see if this makes sense. So we're saying if they sell 100 units, they make $300. When they sell 25 units, they've broken even. So their profit starts on that 26th unit, right? They start making money as they sell anything greater than 25. Then by the time they've sold 100, they've made $300 over and above the cost. Okay? Now, next question. So how many units must be sold to produce a profit of $9,000? So let's say their goal is to make $9,000, and they need to know what kind of how many units they need to sell in order to realize that $9,000. So how would we do that? Where would we put that $9,000? Anybody? Huh? Right, the P equals $9,000, right? And then we're solving for X. So in this case, we'd say 9,000 equals 4x minus 100. So again, we're trying to find profit, so we're using our P of X equation, setting it equal to 9,000, and solving for X. So we add 100. So 9100 equals 4x. Divide by 4. And we get, oh, I don't have that written down. Did I? Okay, which seems like a lot, but again, that makes sense when you think about 100 units only gives you $300 of profit. So they get 9,275 units. Okay, make sense? Again, it's a lot of words. And the key to working these problems is actually going back and thinking about profit, you know, how's that defined? What kind of equation does that look like? Now, okay, what I want you guys to do, again, just like we did last class, either with your partner or on your own, I want you to work through this food truck taco equation. And this takes you through setting up marginal and fixed cost, revenue, break even, and profit. Okay? All right, so let's go through this. So the cost equation again is 45 cents basically times x plus 750. He charges $1.50 per taco. So concentrating on the cost equation, Julie, what is the marginal cost based on C of x?
45 cents. Okay.
Right, 45 cents or 0.45, right, is the M of the cost equation. And Mary Kate, what is the fixed cost from the cost equation?
750.
750. Okay, good. Okay. Anna, what is the revenue equation then for R of X? R of X equals 1.5 X, right? So it's price, how much she's charging for her tacos, times how many tacos she sells, right? Okay, Christy, so what is the break-even quantity?
R of Q equals C of Q.
Right, so
I got,
so how did you set it up?
I did 1.05 x equals 750.
Okay, so 1.5x equals,
Oh, I did 1.5x equals 0.45x plus 750.
okay,
And after
then,
that, I got 1.05x equals 750, and then I got x equals 714.
okay, so when you solve this equation, you get x equals 714.29. So we can round, actually on these, When you're talking actual objects, you know, actual products, you really do want to round up. Because if she sells 714, she's not going to exactly make it up to her cost. So we want to round up on these. So 715 tacos. Okay, make sense? Okay, so she sells 715 tacos in order to meet her cost. Now, what's the profit function? How would we set up the profit function? Jack? Yeah, go ahead and how you set it up.
Px equals 1.05x minus 750.
Okay, let's set it up first. So it's actually
the R
yeah. So R of x is what?
minus C of x.
Okay. Which becomes 0.45x plus 700, right? Minus, nope. Right, 1.5x minus 0.45x plus 700. So when we simplify that, 750. Sorry, H blocks might be hard. 750. Right? Oh. Okay. So final profit function is what? 1.05 x minus 7. Everybody agree with that? Okay. So now the profit on 920 tacos, we plug in 920 into our profit equation, right? So we're finding P of 920. And Megan, what'd you get for P of 920? $216. Okay, so she doesn't start making a profit till 715 tacos are sold. When she sells 920 tacos, she's actually made a profit of 216. How many tacos must be sold to produce a profit of $90? How do we set that up? Sarah, what do we do to set that up? What do we do with the 90? Right, we set the profit equation equal to 90, right? So we say 90 equals 1.05x minus 750, and solve for x, and what did you get? 800 flat? Yeah. Okay. So to make $90, she has to sell 800 tacos. And then when she sells 920 tacos, the profit is up to $260. Make sense? Okay, so the last one, if she sells 60 tacos a day, how long will it take her to start making a profit? Alexis, how did she do that?
I just took the 715 or 715 I got and divided it by 60.
Right, so she doesn't start making a profit until she sells 715 tacos. And if she's selling 715 tacos, if she's selling 60 a day, it will take her how many days to do that? 12. So it becomes 11.9, which again you want to round up to 12 days. Okay, does that make sense? So that was just a little bit different take on it. Olivia, question? Okay, so again, it's a lot of words. The math itself isn't difficult. I don't think anyway. But it's just a lot of words to keep track of what each equation means. So questions about that? Well, the supply and demand equations are so weird. You know, with the just their setup, I think is strange. But yeah, I think this is more straightforward, and the terms you're used to hearing about. I'm going to let you all get started on your homework. So the homework is 19 through 25 odd. Again, that is cost. And then, what's that? Okay, then that's scholarship. The homework, the rest of it, 31, 32, 33, 36, and 37, I spelled out every letter you need to do. And I think all of them are only through C except 33, and you don't have to do E or F. Okay, so you guys can spend the rest of the time on homework.